Patrick Haggerty here, Basin Youth for Christ at the Broadway Theater here in Malin. We're going to pick up the story in John chapter 18. Jesus has been arrested, and we're going to see how Peter responds to that, okay? Verse 15, Simon Peter followed Jesus, as did another of the disciples. That other disciple was acquainted with the high priest, so he was allowed to enter the high priest's courtyard with Jesus. Peter had to stay outside the gate. Then the disciple who knew the high priest spoke to the woman watching the gate, and she let Peter in. And the woman asked Peter, "You're not one of the man's disciples, are you?" "No," he said, "I'm not." Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards had made a charcoal fire, and they stood around it, warming themselves. And Peter stood with them, warming himself. I'm going to skip down now to verse 25. Meanwhile, as Simon Peter was standing by the fire warming himself, they asked him again, "You're not one of his disciples, are you?" And he denied it, saying, "No, I'm not." But one of the household slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Didn't I see you out there in the olive grove with Jesus?" Again, Peter denied it, and immediately a rooster crowed. We know from Matthew, Mark, and Luke that when Peter denied it the third time, he denied it with emphasis, and he swears that he doesn't know Jesus. But let's back up for just a second. We find here Peter is following Jesus after Jesus has been arrested, but he's following at a distance. They get to the place where Jesus is put on trial at Caiaphas' house, at his place of residence there, which, by the way, when you go to Israel, they've uncovered the exact street, the actual stones that Jesus would have walked on, and that this entire encounter would have taken place, plus the historical archaeological residence of Caiaphas, the high priest. You can go to these places. It's incredible. But anyway, regardless, Peter gets there. He's following at a distance. And John comes back. He's the other disciple mentioned, and he makes sure that Peter can get through the gate. And then it says that a woman, we know from the other Gospels that she's a servant girl. She's not an older woman. This is a young girl, and she says, "Oh, aren't you one of Jesus' disciples?" And he says, "No, I'm not." And 2 more times, for a total of 3. Peter is asked the same question, and each time he denies it 3 times. The third time, what Jesus prophesied was going to happen all the way back in the upper room when they're there in the Passover. It happened. The rooster crows. Peter remembers that Jesus had prophesied to him and said, "Hey, before the rooster crows, you will have denied me 3 times. Peter recognizes it. In the Gospel of Luke, we know that in that exact moment, Jesus looks across the courtyard at Peter, makes eye contact with him. Peter goes out and he weeps bitterly. And we know at that point that during that process, Peter repents because there's a change in his life. There's a change in his behavior. We witness it all in the book of Acts. But what I wanted to highlight briefly today is this. You ever felt like you let Jesus down? You ever been more worried about your own reputation and what people are going to think about you if you were to tell them about Jesus? So you hide it, you keep it on the down low, or you deny it, or you act like you don't believe? Well, listen, it's the same thing when we do that. When we chicken out, when we're cowards like that, it's the same thing. We're denying Jesus. But listen, we know as we continue to read this story that Peter finds not only forgiveness from Jesus Christ for what he's done, but love, compassion, understanding, healing, restoration. And the same is available for you and for me. Man, maybe you're in a day, a season where you just feel like, man, I'm really letting the Lord down. I just been denying him. Good news. Same good news that Peter had, man. Let's weep bitterly over our failure. Confess it to the Lord and trust that the God who loves us beyond words will forgive us, cleanse us, make us right again, and set us out to keep living for him just day by day. Peter found forgiveness. And so will you and I if we just come the same way he did. Weep over our sin, repent, return, and man will be restored and forgiven. God bless you.